we're good.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission agenda for April 8th, 2024. Would like to join us in a flag salute as we begin our agenda. Thank you. Okay, so that's me when I turn it on. What's happening?
Do you want to turn off?
No reverb? Can you hear me?
I can try it again.
Hello? Hello? No. How about that? Hello? Can anyone hear me? There you go.
Try it again.
Is that any better? There we go. Thank you. All right, so let's begin with our agenda. And item 2 is a TV coverage announcement. Ms. Castro?
Good morning. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County Santa Barbara Television CSB TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orchid areas. Rebroadcast of the Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays, 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. This hearing will also be streamed live on CSB TV website and will be available for download in a day or two.
Go ahead and proceed with the roll call.
Okay, Commissioner Park,
Here.
Commissioner Cooney,
Here.
Commissioner Reed,
Here.
Madam Bridley.
Wonderful. Okay, so now we come to our agenda status report from Secretary
Oh.
Wilson.
Your mic.
Agenda status report for Secretary Wilson.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. In regards to the status of our agenda, we have 3 items on our standard agenda. First item is the HR Property Holdings Trust, new residents, a specific plan amendment to the Orchid Community Park sports field lighting, and then the last item is TAT Ventures LLC, which is an outdoor cannabis cultivation in the Buellton area. I can move to the projection report, Madam Chair, if you'd like.
Please.
So our next scheduled hearing
Yep.
is,
Secretary Wilson, just a second. I didn't get a copy of it. Does anyone else have a copy of the projection report already printed? Because I didn't print it from home. Thank you.
It's on the packet too that I provided on.
Really? Oh, I apologize.
It's ordered.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Wilson.
all right, thank you, Madam Chair. So we canceled May 29th, and we also canceled June 5th. So that takes us to June 12th is our next hearing, and that will be here in Santa Maria. And there are 2 items on that, the Arctic Cold Agricultural Industry Overlay, as well as we had continued the Ag Enterprise Ordinance for that day as well. And then following that, our next hearing is June 26. It is noted that Commissioner Bradley will be absent that day. We have 3 items on that. An appeal of cannabis cultivation in the Carpinteria area, and then the appeal of a YMCA project in San Ynez, and then another cannabis project, and that is going to be in Santa Barbara. Again, June 26th is in Santa Barbara, 3 items. And then following that, July 3rd, we have no items projected. And then July 10th, we currently have 1 item projected, which is an appeal of the grading in the Buellton area, or Lompoc area. And then July 31st, we have 1 item. I think we'd continue that, the appeal of the El Capitan Canyon Campground. And then looking into August, which is hard to believe that we're already looking at August, is that we do have 1 item that's not on the projection report, but it came in late yesterday, which is an appeal of the Sentinel Peak Resources. They are adding trucking to their project. And so that's on August 14th here in Santa Maria. So that concludes the projection report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yeah. Were there any questions or comments from the commission? No. Commissioner Park, your light's on. Did you have any comments on the projection report?
Mine's blinking on and off.
Okay. No? Thank you. Okay, very good. Let's move.
Turn on again.
All right, let's move on. This is the point in our agenda where we actually have public comment for comments to the commission that are not otherwise agendized on today's schedule. So do we have any requests for public comment, Ms. Castro?
We do have a hand raised. We have Diana Sandoval.
All right. Ms. Sandoval, we actually limit public comment to 3 minutes, so please proceed.
Diana, you could dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Dear Chair, members of the board. I am Diana Sandoval. I'm here for the 4th time to discuss the unsafe bridge that Building and Safety allowed to be rebuilt without permits on my property. As a mom of 2 small children, safety has always been my main priority. I've been pleading with Ms. Plowman and Building and Safety to please enforce its own judgments and ordinances for the safe rebuilding of the bridge. I've been pleading for the county to enforce proper permits to prevent another accident. In 2017, someone fell through the bridge. My property was held liable, even though my property doesn't use the bridge. It's a service entrance for a private polo estate, but because I'm the majority owner and it's in my property, I am legally responsible. Since I last spoke, Building and Safety decided to fast track and issue a same-day over-the-counter permit for the structurally unsafe bridge. This permit authorizes the unsafe bridge with deficient abutments for pedestrian and light utility use, despite never having been permitted before. In recent discussions with fellow bridge owners, we've shared our experiences with the permitting process. Surprisingly, none of those owners were given an over-the-counter permit for repairs, even for bridges damaged by the 2018 debris flow or properties that rely on the bridges as their only access. Are the rules selectively applied to the ultra-rich? Building and Safety's handling of the bridge on my property makes me believe that is the case. Despite regulations meant to treat everyone equally and implement safeguards, the actions taken, or perhaps not taken, raises questions about fairness and accountability. It's a concerning reflection of a system where privilege holds more influence and seems to outweigh fairness and justice. Which leads me to a comparison of one of the bridges less than 3 miles away, which is currently undergoing permitting for the same work of replacing decks, railings, and beams. Both bridges are in the coastal zone, over 120 square feet, any ESH, and flood zone, but this bridge requires plan check, ESH, fire engineering, zoning, flood control, and other reviews. In contrast, the bridge conditions on my property are worse. The abutments are deficient per 4 structural engineers, including the county's engineer who stated the abutments are of primary concern. Let me repeat, that's the county's own engineer. The bridge on my property was red tagged, encroaches on my property due to being rebuilt outside of the easement, and has a previous lawsuit for negligently maintaining, repairing, constructing, and modifying the bridge. Despite all of this, the bridge on my property was issued an over-the-counter permit, while the other bridge is undergoing the regular permit process. Last Monday, I submitted an appeal of over-the-counter permit number 24 CMP 00475 to Building and Safety. Today, I am asking you to please support this appeal. The over-the-counter permit should be revoked due to the bridge's unsafe condition, the incomplete application, and trespass on my property, which Building and Safety allowed, resulting in the violation of my property rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Castro. Just a quick question for staff. So when someone appeals a over-the-counter permit, is that something that just goes to the director, or what is the path on that?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, this is a building and safety action. So there's a separate process for appeals on building and safety permits, and it goes to like the Board of Housing Appeals for building permits. So it's outside of the purview of the Planning Commission.
Okay. It sounds like Ms. Sandoval's done the best she can, so thank you for your comments, Ms. Sandoval. All right, and that concludes our public comment?
Yes.
All right, thank you. That brings us to our Planning Commission informational reports, and if any commissioner has something they want to share, this is the time to do it. Commissioner Park.
You know, there's some comments I want to make about the recent approval of the housing element, but I'd prefer to do it immediately following our executive director's report, which I assume we'll have, right? Yeah, so if you don't mind me just kind of reserving that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments, then let's move on to our minutes. Item 8 on the agenda. First, we have the minutes of April 1, our April Fool's Day meeting. Do we have a motion to approve with or without corrections?
I'll move approval, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair and Commissioners,
Oh, yes?
so
April 1.
April 1st is the South County projects.
Yeah,
So I think there was
had
some discussion that was going to happen.
Yeah, I do have a comment on that.
Okay.
I believe that the minutes incorrectly state that we rejected the rezone of the Red Tail project on Baylord Avenue in Carpinteria. Okay? And I'd like to relate what I thought happened and then why I think it matters. In fact, I'm going to relate why I think it matters first. As we'll talk about later, the board adopted the Planning Commission recommendation at its last board meeting for the housing element, and but with the exception of our purported rejection of the Baylord project for rezone. And some board members were a little sensitive about it because it made it look like they were rejecting our recommendation. Okay? And there was a lot of texting going back and forth during the hearing about what was going on there. So it drew some attention. And, you know, overall, I think we have a purpose of supporting the board, and I don't want to make members of the board look bad for rejecting Planning Commission recommendations when that's not really what they're doing. My recollection is that we, and particularly you and I, Commissioner Briley, made an effort to make sure that rezones in every single district other than the second district were in fact recommended by the PC so that we could get as many units as possible and then have discretion to limit the approval of every single project in the second district. And there is no reason that anyone would have favored opposing the rezone of the Baylord project because it would have lost 9 units of affordable, which no one was trying to oppose affordable, and it would have required that to proceed as a builder's remedy project where we have much less control than as a rezone. So I don't think that was the intent of the Planning Commission. I do recall that Commissioner Cooney early on expressed a desire to approve the rezone of the Van Wingerden projects and perhaps reject the Red Tail project, which I think I would have probably said the same thing were I in his shoes. But I think we all made it clear that under the balancing tool, that was a pending project and was going to be included anyway. It just wouldn't be included as a rezone. So when we actually had the motion, which I didn't make, but I had many discussions with you, Commissioner Bradley, on how to make it, was to approve every project minus the McCosker-Leland one and the Georgi one, and then to favor a modification of Montessori. So in essence, I don't think we rejected that we had a motion to reject the rezone of the Baylor project. And I'd like to correct that because I don't like to see in the media and everywhere else that we rejected it for reasons that are inexplicable, according to quote one of the speakers at the board hearing, and that somehow we were in conflict with the board about that.
Okay, thank you for those observations. Commissioner Cooney, did you have anything to add to that? Because I do, but let me hear from you first.
Oh, Madam Chair, my recollection is that in discussion of the Baylord project, hold on just a second here.
Do you want to try now? Let's try to put them back over because I think that's what's causing the.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. And I'm not even on for your patience.
Yes, let's go ahead.
Let's go ahead and try it again.
Okay, is this working for everybody? Okay. I was discussing the minutes of the special hearing of April 1, 2024. And perhaps, Madam Chair, we ought to recess the hearing until we get this fixed.
Yeah, maybe we take a break for a couple minutes until this works out. Sorry, everybody. Thank you. Nail biter. Okay, thank you for your, wow, really? Thank you for your patience on that. Don't think am I on? All right. Thank you for your patience on that little technical challenge over here. So, Commissioner Park, you were talking about the inclusion or not inclusion, and then it went into Commissioner Cooney's recollection.
Oh, right, Madam Chair. I had a recollection of discussing my concerns with the Baylor project in particular. And we had support for issues that were being discussed with regard to Baylor, but I honestly don't recall that we voted specifically to exclude it. It was part of a general recommendation, and I would support amending the minutes to reflect that the Baylor project was included in the projects approved by the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. I recall the same thing, and I appreciate Commissioner Park calling me a couple days ago to talk about it, because we had a lot of discussion. It was going back and forth. So I do concur that I think we wanted to include it in the rezones, not omit it, despite the discussion that we had preceding that. So I don't know if we want to wait for staff to make that correction and bring them back to us, or if we can just list it in the South Coast rezone sites, or if staff is concerned about it with any other part of the record to the board.
So, Madam Chair, my recommendation is that we continue this item to the next hearing, or continue the minutes. Staff will need to go back and look at the tapes and verify, and then we'll come back and bring the minutes back at the next hearing.
Totally good, because our minds were in many places that day and try. Okay, thank you. So we're going to postpone the approval of the April 1 minutes, and that would bring us to the approval of the April 24th minutes. Does anybody have a motion / corrections to those?
Madam Chair, I have an inquiry with respect to the Gaviota project, which appears on page 3 of our minutes of April 24, and the action was reported here in the minutes that Commissioner Park moved and I seconded, and then we voted 4-0 to continue the item to the hearing of July 31. And there have been so many shifts in the projection report that I just want to be sure that's correct. That is what our record reflects. Okay. Then I'm prepared to move approval of the minutes of the April 24, 2024 meeting.
And I'll second that.
And I'll do a roll call.
Yes.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Madam Bradley.
Aye. We had a request, I remember making a request to staff, and there was a quick discussion about trying to agendize something related to the 330 cases coming forward that this demonstrated, that case number, which was to have a discussion item with staff about how we're going to get through all these housing projects with the, objective design standards and possibly only staff looking at all the plans. And I just wanted to make sure that doesn't get lost, that we actually get that on a projection report somehow. It's not necessarily urgent, but hopefully in the next couple months we can find a half hour to talk about that. And I don't know that it has to be included in the minutes, right? I think it was after this item. So, all right, then let's do a roll call on the minutes.
Okay. So Commissioner Park,
Aye. But I do agree with Commissioner Bradley. I really would like to see that happen.
yeah, we will put it on our projection report. And then Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
and Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
and then Madam Bradley.
Aye.
Vote carries 4-0 to approve the minutes.
Thank you. All right. Okay, that brings us to our director's report. Secretary Wilson, are you standing in, or do we have Director Plowman?
Madam
I'm
Chair
on
and
the line.
Commissioners,
Oh, there she is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So yes, the key thing I have to report is that we made it through the housing element rezone hearings. The board took action on Tuesday, the 30th for North County sites. They made some changes to what the Planning Commission did. And in the end, they, I'm going to list out the sites that they approved for you. They rezoned Apollo, which is in Vandenberg Village, the Blue Sky Center in Cuyama, Chumash site in Santa Ynez, and then in Orcutt, they included the Boys and Girls Club, Key Site 10, Key Site 11, Hummel Cottages. They excluded Mariposa Real, which was something the Planning Commission had included, but D4 says he's going to work with People Self-Help Housing on a future project. And then Element Church was included. And lastly, there was a proposal to move the existing MRO zoning on Key Site 3, which was placed on Key Site 3 as part of the last housing element cycle, and put that on Key Site 1. And they did opt to do that. So Key Site 3 was downzoned, and Key Site 1 was upzoned as part of that. So we are at about I think it ended up being about 195 units above what was required to meet the RENA plus the 15% buffer. So that gives the county more flexibility if projects come in at different levels of affordability than anticipated. So I think that was a positive. And then on the South Coast on Friday, it was quite a long day, but the board approved all of the sites that the Planning Commission included, and including Baylord. So we'll figure out, I'm not sure. I obviously misunderstood if that is what the Planning Commission's action was. So we'll get that sorted out. But they did include Baylord, the 2 Van Wingerden sites, Hope Church, St. Vincent's East and West, San Marcos Grower 1 and 2, which is basically the same site, but one is the Housing Authority property. They did make a change to the zoning for San Marcos 1, the larger property. Instead of 3040, they went to 2030. And then they included the Tatum site. They included the Montessori site after quite a bit of back and forth, but it ended up being included in the configuration that the Planning Commission recommended, with the DR 12.3 on the west side, 3040 on the east side, and then on the southern portion, the 3-acre park. They included St. Athanasius, Scott, Equil, all the Caird sites, 1, 2, and 3, Friendship Manor, and Glen Annie. So the 2 they excluded were McCloskey and Georgie. And they included all of the 9 county-owned sites. And those will, as we move forward, the designation of affordability will be identified, and that's flexible. So if we're falling short in one category, we could increase what's on the county-owned site potentially. So there's some flexibility there. But I think the hearings went quite well, and I would say that's really the Planning Commission contributed to that because of the structure that you took and moved through the process, and I thought it was quite organized, and the board ended up essentially following that structure. So it made it easier for them. The one key difference was that we sort of had a spreadsheet about who voted what on each site. But it ended up being quite manageable in a situation where it could be unmanageable. And so I wanted to give the Planning Commission's credit where credit was due. I mean, our staff obviously has something to do with that too, and they worked quite hard to make sure that things went smoothly. But I think it ended up being a very productive meeting, and quite frankly, a significant step towards helping solve the housing crisis in the county of Santa Barbara. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Plummer. We have a couple commissioners with questions. I know that Commissioner Park has probably a good one, but I'm also seeing Commissioner Reed's light on. So, Commissioner Reed, do you want to?
Yes, a couple of questions. First, with respect to the North County, didn't the supervisors also regarding Richards Ranch, didn't they recommend proceeding with a development agreement? I thought I saw that.
Yeah, Commissioner Reed, through the chair, that is correct. They did not include it in the rezone package, but they want the department to work with Mr. Stolte and his group on creating a development agreement and moving a project through the process.
Okay, then it's one additional question. I just noticed the Board of Supervisors yesterday had a presentation on the development or opening of a project, a homeless project called Posada. I forget what the last part of the name was, but it was described on the news as being part of a former county juvenile hall property. Was that on any of the pieces that we included in the recommended rezones?
Yes, Commissioner Reed, through the chair. That is a temporary housing site for homeless. on the juvenile hall site, which is included in ours as a long-term housing site. These are temporary structures that I think they'll be there for about 3 years.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Park?
Yes, I wanted to share some observations that I heard from various people, including members of the Board of Supervisors and developers, that I think that other members of the Planning Commission would not have heard. That's why I want to share them. And I want to share some of my own observations. One, I actually was able to take a couple of the members of the board horseback riding after our own hearings on the 1st of April, and they were effusively complimentary on how the Planning Commission had processed the thing, because we gave them, as they put it, a beautifully organized package with a 5-0 vote, and they said it's going to make it a lot easier for them to process it, and I saw that in action. On Friday, I watched some of that hearing on TV. Then I had a medical appointment, and I showed up in blue jeans and a cowboy shirt among all these suited people for about the last hour and watched them. And one would have thought that deliberations on the housing element could have taken the board a matter of a day or even days, and it was a matter of hours, and not very many hours. As I stood up to leave, 3 members of the board came and spoke to me and thanked the Planning Commission for its great work in making it easier for them. And every single member of the board, when they made their comments, thanked their planning commissioner and thanked the commission. And then every major developer that was still there, and they were all that were in the room, came up and did the same thing. And I remember talking to, I think it was to Bob Nelson, maybe others, that, if anyone ever questioned the value of what the Planning Commission could do for the board, this was the answer. And I think they took it that way. But I also wanted to thank, in turn, our staff. I cannot remember a more difficult thing that staff has ever had to work on while I've been following planning commissions, either as a private citizen or being on it, because it was building something from scratch, and it was something that none of us here in the county were really comfortable with, but was imposed upon us by the state. And how would we conduct this Herculean effort? And I think we saw it at the end. In particular, we had 5 members of our staff that I want to call out. One, of course, is Director Plowman, who underwent a great deal of stress, I'm sure, in the last few years, but got the troops through. We have people who are very senior in our department, Alan Bell, and we had Alex Tuttle and Jesse Blossom Steele and Ava Morera. It took all of their considerable skills and efforts to put it together. I kind of had to tease Mr. Bell afterwards, because I think he's been interested in retiring, and he made the decision to not leave the staff in the lurch and retire, but to actually stay on a little bit extra and follow it through. And it just shows there's sort of an intergenerational cooperation there of somebody who's had the experience and saying, keep it calm, we'll get through it, and getting through it. Another thing I want to observe on, and I'll stop after a while here, is I've been acutely aware in my legal career on how gender roles have kind of been adapting and changing, which is all a good thing in professional work. And here, this was, I think this took the skills of our various genders to get through. And I'm looking at Commissioner Bridley, because I think without Commissioner Bridley and our various members of the county council and Director Plowman and the female staff members I've pointed out, and at the risk of sounding sexist, but I guess I'm old enough I can get away with this stuff, this took a very strong female contribution of tolerance, collaboration, and patience to make it work. It wouldn't have happened this way in the old days. And I'm including our private planners such as Gail Ray Macon and Laurel Fisher Perez. This was a group effort, and the group didn't know how exactly to do it. No one ever laid it out, but it was done, and it was really good. And to get a 5-0 vote at the Board of Supervisors and have them happy is something we should be proud of. So I'm very proud of everyone who participated in this. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Park. That's great. Oh, and, Director Plowman, did you want to acknowledge those kudos? You should.
I did, and I really appreciate that. And the team, this team worked very hard for almost 3 years, and Alan Bell played a huge role in keeping things on course and making the sacrifice to not retire in March, which was huge for us. And we're very grateful to him. And then Alex came in the middle of it, right? The middle of the storm, was able to jump right in and be effective and help guide the team. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of them. And there were two other things I wanted to mention of what the board did. San Marcos Growers came in and offered more affordable units on the Housing Authority section of the project, another 28 low-income units. And they also offered 30 upper moderate income units that are targeted at 160% AMI. So they have 50 moderate and 30 upper moderate. So those are units we don't really get. And they're tied up for 55 years. And so I have to say, I feel very happy about that because that was an objective of mine throughout this process. And I really appreciate the developers who came through the process and upped their game each step of the way. And I think that was the result of some of the critique we got about the beauty contest. I mean, some people criticized us about it, but I think in the end, it resulted in better projects for the county. We got recreational space, we got moderate units, and those are things we wouldn't have gotten if we hadn't had a process where there was some competition, frankly. The other thing that happened is that the board decided not to make the change to the circulation element. And they asked me point blank, does that matter? Is it going to make a difference on how we process cases? And I said, no, it's not going to make a difference because we have to follow the state law. And Supervisor Nelson, I thought, made a good case in saying, the state law is changing all the time. And so instead of making a change in our circulation element that could later restrict us in some capacity, let's leave it the way it is, and then the county will follow the state law as it evolves. And so that is where they ended up, and I think that's fine. So those are the two things I wanted to make sure the Planning Commission knew.
Thank you, Director Plowman. And I had a couple quick questions to follow up on that. Let me continue on with the circulation element because I had many conversations with the Second District Office about that, and we didn't spend a lot of time talking about this at the Planning Commission, but the amendment was going to remove the ability for the Planning Commission to have the discretion and findings and staff, therefore, to analyze it this way, to rely policy-wise on our level of service thresholds, which we've been using under CEQA for 4 decades, and which were taken away by the state under CEQA, that now we only do vehicle miles traveled analysis. But then the concomitant policy analysis for cases was a level of service threshold where if you add a certain number of cars to an intersection and you drop it in a level of service, you would have a policy inconsistency. And the thing that we voted to actually include, and it slipped my mind. I didn't really like it, but we included it in the package as recommended by staff. The board took it out because a lot of the public comment during the debate, and I was at the hearing in the morning in the room, and then I watched it online later, was a lot of people are worried about traffic. I'm worried about traffic with thousands of units being generated in the 2nd district and lots in the 3rd district too. If we don't have something that relates to how the public feels driving on the road, level of service at an intersection, and we just give them this amorphous concept about vehicle miles traveled, that was going to take the reality of approving these cases in the future even further away from how people are experiencing them. So I was very happy that the Board of Supervisors identified that and took it out of the circulation element amended that was proposed in the packet. I appreciated the fact that Chris Sneddon, our new Public Works Director, was there explaining that's going to be tricky. And I believe that, staff was recommending it and pulling for that because you thought that was going to be perceived as a barrier by state HCD in approving the housing element. So I'm hoping that they can look at everything else we did in compliance with their directive. Thank you very not much, state. But hopefully that won't be a problem in terms of getting the final approval. And on that note, where is it with the state now, Director Plowman?
So I don't think it's going to be a problem with the state. I think we have to follow state law regardless, and so they have a backstop. So I honestly don't think they're going to make a fuss about us not including that. I think we'll be fine. With respect to the state, we were fortunate in that even though we were late in February on the rezones, because we had 1 year to meet them, the state never took us out of compliance, because we were making progress towards these hearings. And we had been communicating with them up until a week before the hearings, where they checked in with us to make sure that we were on track. And so we will be submitting all of the information either today or tomorrow to the state. We have to get a number of signatures and whatnot on the resolutions. And then we'll submit that to the state, and we should have a compliant housing element. Remain in compliance.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. Any other comments,
right.
Commissioner Park?
Yeah. Director Plowman's comments reminded me I forgot to acknowledge the tremendous contribution of the public, both through individual comments and by and through organizations, and of course well, I was going to say the contributions of the developers, but the continuous pressure and attention to detail from the public and other organizations fueled and educated the drive of staff and others to go get things from the developers. And I think if one looked at what these projects were at the time of the workshop before the board, the so-called beauty contest, which was a brilliant idea, by the way, you could see that the change in the projects was marked from that date to when we first heard them. They improved so much. And they improved even more from the time of the Planning Commission consideration up through even the last days and hours before the board approved that. And that wasn't just a coincidence. It happened. And we've wound up with a lot more affordable. We wound up with more aesthetically pleasing projects. A concern that I heard a lot about from my contacts, such as Dan Giron and Mark Wilkinson with the Trails Council and folks with CRATAC and all that, was recreation. And maybe we didn't get everything organized the way folks would have hoped to have seen it in the housing element, but we did our best. And of course, we had to get approval by the state. But in Goleta alone, we wound up with a regional park, a nice passive use park through the oak trees in Tatum, a lovely neighborhood park on the south of Patterson, and at the last minute we wound up with more of an active use park that's going to happen on the Montessori property. And so, what do they say about making sausage? Well, the sausage came out well here, and it wouldn't have happened that way without the input of the public in these other organizations, so they deserve credit as well. Thanks.
True. Well, thank you.
Madam
I
Chair, I
think
just
that
have,
concludes.
I just have a couple
Oh,
of
yeah.
things to report to you just about future board items. And just a reminder that the Climate Action Plan, which is going to be brought forward by CSD, is going to be at the board on June 4th. And the Moriarty appeal of the cannabis CUP will be on the 4th as well. And then the following week, we have budget hearings. And I think it's on a Tuesday and a Thursday of the following week. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Plowman. That was very helpful, and appreciate your attendance during our replay of the housing element. That was a lot of work. Okay, so let's move on to our standard agenda. Ms. Castro, can you read that into the record for us?
Yes, so the hearing on the request of Tim Pasquinelli, property owner, to consider the following. Case number 23 CDH 007 for approval of coastal development permit in compliance with section 35-169 of Article 2 Coastal Zoning Ordinance. Case number 23 DVP 0009 for approval of a development plan in compliance with section 35-174 of Article 2 Coastal Zoning Ordinance. And case number 24 NGD 0002 to adopt the mitigated negative declaration pursuant to the state guidelines implementation of CEQA.
Thank you, Ms. Castro. And this is the time for planning commissioners to provide Brown Act disclosures, site visits. Do we have anyone who wants to make a report? Seeing none, I just want to disclose that I had a lengthy site visit, honestly, in 2023. I don't even remember the month. I think it was maybe September. It was a long time ago. And then I had with Mr. Cannell, as well as Laura Bernard and Gallery Macon, all representing the applicant. And then yesterday, or earlier this week, last week, I had a brief email regarding the site visit also from Mr. Cannell. Seeing none other, then why don't we proceed to the staff report?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Willow Brown. I will be presenting the HR Property Holdings Trust new single-family dwelling project. The property outlined in red on this map is located at 4683 and 4677 Via Roblata in the Eastern Glida Valley Community Plan Area, 2nd Supervisorial District in Coastal Hope Ranch. The property is made up of 2 legal parcels totaling 7.94 acres, which will be voluntarily merged prior to issuance of the coastal development permit. Access is provided off of an existing easement off Via Roblata, shown with a blue dashed line on the map. This is a site plan of the proposed project. The project is a request for a development plan and coastal development permit to allow for the demolition of 2 primary residences, a secondary residence, 2 detached garages, and an accessory building, and the construction of a new 6,741 square foot primary residence with an 8,088 square foot fully subterranean basement, 5,902 square foot fully subterranean garage, and 2,519 square foot utility tunnel. The site plan on the left shows the existing development on site proposed for demolition outlined in red, and the site plan on the right shows the proposed single-family dwelling outlined in blue. The current above-grade development proposed to be demolished totals 17,900 square feet, and the proposed above-grade development totals 6,741 square feet. The remainder of the proposed square footage will be located below grade. This is a rendering of the proposed single-family dwelling. The single-family dwelling will have a maximum height of 24 feet 1 inch. This is the proposed floor plan for the single-family dwelling. On the left is the first story, and on the right is the proposed underground basement, garage, and utility tunnel. The basement comprises 55% of the total living space. Locating the majority of the living space underground significantly improves the energy efficiency of the single-family dwelling. The basement is not exposed to external temperature swings and does not require as much electricity for heating and cooling, which is the main driver of energy consumption in residential spaces. The below-grade square footage enables the project to meet the California Energy Code requirements. These are photos of the existing development on the project site. The photo on the left is an aerial view facing south, and the photo on the right shows the existing development facing west. The proposed project is consistent with Article 2 regulations, including the purpose and intent of the EX1 zone district, height, setbacks, and parking. It is also consistent with policies in the comprehensive plan, including the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan and Coastal Land Use Plan, such as policies regarding water resources, noise, hillside and watershed protection, cultural resources, visual resources, and adequate services. The project is located on a coastal bluff and is therefore subject to bluff retreat and sea level rise. The 100-year development setback was calculated based on slope stability, the building code, and the bluff retreat setback. The cumulative setback is 209 feet, which is shown as the red dashed line on the site plan. The single-family dwelling is located beyond the 209-foot setback and is consistent with all policies related to bluff retreat. Item 17 on the site plan is a lawn area in front of the residence enclosed by a low wall that will retain a maximum of 3 feet of fill near the residence and about 2 feet of fill at the seaward limit of the area. Although the project is not within the design control overlay, any residential structure on a lot adjacent to the sea is subject to review and approval by the Board of Architectural Review. The project was reviewed by the SBAR on June 2nd, 2023. They stated that it was an exemplary project, they are in support of the architectural projection beyond the standard height limit, and they appreciate the basement feature to minimize above-grade development. The project can return for preliminary approval following approval by the decision maker. A mitigated negative declaration was prepared for the project to study its anticipated environmental effects. No significant and unavoidable impacts were found to occur. Significant but mitigable impacts were found in the areas of aesthetic and visual resources, biological resources, cultural resources, noise, and public facilities. Mitigation measures to reduce these impacts to less than significant levels are included in the coastal development permit as conditions of approval. Insignificant impacts were found for the remaining resource areas. Staff recommends that your commission make the required findings for approval of the project, adopt the final MND and mitigation monitoring program contained in the conditions of approval, and approve the project subject to the conditions included as attachments B1 and B2 of the staff report. Staff is available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Did any commissioners have any questions for staff? I had a quick one that just popped in. Can you go back to the slide of the elevation and tell me what is the height exceedance? And I think it's not in our findings, right? It's just maybe a guideline for SBAR review. Help me out there.
Chair Bradley, architectural features that provide for architectural character can exceed the height limit by a maximum of 8 feet, subject to review by the SBAR. And so the entryway, I believe, is 189 square feet and exceeds the 25-foot height limit by a maximum of 8 feet.
Okay. Like a cupola would be or something like that. Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. All right. So no questions from the PC. Then we would go to our applicant's presentation. And I wasn't expecting to be chair today, but I think if you can do it in 10 minutes.
I can do it in less than that, thanks to Willow's presentation. I think she pretty much gave us everything we need to know. This is an extraordinary project.
Start with your name.
My name. My name is Brian Cornell. Cornell Collective. Laura Bernard is our project architect who couldn't be here today, so I'm subbing for her. And she's done all the heavy lifting on this. I guess the one thing I would like to note is that my client has owned this property for almost 20 years, and he cherishes it. It's adjacent to Moore Mesa. The history of it, interestingly, it was graded flat for a lemon orchard back in the 20s and remained vacant until the 70s, and lemons never grew there, so it became fallow, really. And I think the adjacent Moore Mesa is really the inspiration for creating just a habitat and something with as little structure above grade as possible along the bluffs. So my client's vision is of a glass house, as you saw in the renderings, and you might go to my page number, I think it is number 6, where we have the renderings. Well, I think that Willow, she did a great job, and I don't need to really go through the plans as much, but I do want to point out that you saw in that original aerial photo, my client owns basically 40 acres, and this is 8 acres of that 40 acres, and we have been working since 2015 on essentially the adjacent site that will really provide a lot of the environmental features that makes this project able to be constructed. Under today's energy compliance, we can't really build a glass house like this. And so the basement became compensating square footage to make it work from an energy compliance standpoint. We're also linking this structure back to a photovoltaic array back on an adjacent parcel that has 480 solar panels and generates close to 5,200 kilowatt hours per day. So it's also, there is a pond on the site that we're using as basically a thermal exchange. So the heating and cooling will all work with that. It's like a geothermal system, essentially. So it's quite innovative, and that is the reason for the tunnels connecting. I have appreciated, again, my client's vision for having a very low impact structure above grade and putting the resources into the ground to make this happen. And I think really I'd like to answer any questions that you all would have about this, and we'll leave it at that.
Well, I have many, many questions, most of which aren't pertinent to what we're doing here today. When I look at that house, I think our biggest task is not to be just overwhelmed by the structure and the plan, but I do have a couple relevant ones. I appreciate your messaging relative to the photovoltaics and other energy features, so that the passive gain from the giant expanses of glass will be, far more greatly compensated for than anything else. I appreciate the very extensive soil studies and other elements included in this preparation, so I don't think there's any problem or concern with that property ultimately becoming part of the ocean. So I appreciate those as well. What's the roofing material going to be on that structure?
So the structure has been an amazing challenge. We've actually are working with the structural engineers who have done many of the Apple stores. The Steve Jobs Theater up at the Apple campus was designed by them, where this structure is supported by glass. So believe it or not, these canted glass walls do some of the support of the roof. Consequently, they are close to 3.5 inches thick panes of laminated glass, laminated and insulated glass, but the roofs do cantilever off of the concrete core of this house and carry the majority of the load, and it is basically going to be a lightweight cementous plaster finish, and then a conventional Sarnafel type vinyl roof over the top. But it will all be that same white color that you see.
3.5-inch thick glass. I'd like to see them work with those when they're installing that.
There's only a few people in the world that can even make those pieces of glass.
Amazing. With respect to the subterranean part of the house, the basement, are the exterior walls going to be poured in place concrete, or
Yes.
what that composition?
Yes, everything that is underground is poured in place concrete.
Okay, an additional question. So at one point, to enter that tunnel, there's going to be a vehicle, a car elevator? Is that?
That's correct. We have at the end of the driveway is the necessary fire department turnaround. So it's a conventional fire department, cul-de-sac that allows for a planter element in the middle. And so that middle element is literally going to be a lift that comes out of the ground that a car will park into and then go underground into the parking area.
Is that going to be hydraulic or electric?
It's probably going to be an electric chain-driven device.
One final question with respect to that entry into the car lift. Is there going to be a berm or some element in the design to prevent water from the surface in event of extreme rain from entering that and going down into the basement?
Yeah, we've looked at a number of design options. I mean, one was to literally make the roof of this elevator a planter, but it's also possible that it will be some sort of a sculptural element, maybe even like a sundial element that is raised above the surface, that it has a curb around it or comes out of the ground slightly so that it nobody can drive over the top of it. So that because it would have to support the weight of a fire truck if a truck drove over it.
Okay, and as you said, the owner actually owns the surrounding parcels.
Correct.
So there's no problem with view or anything with any neighbors since he is the neighbor.
Correct. I think the only way really this is going, you might be able to get a glimpse of it from More Mesa if you sort of peeked through the property, but the only other way to see it really is from maybe a kayak or a sailboat out in the ocean.
Pretty amazing. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we want to have the record show that Chair Martinez has arrived.
Yes. Good morning. Kind of an odyssey of getting here, but I got here. And Commissioner Park.
That was a good segue into my question here, because I like to paddle a surf ski out in front of that area, and I thought that would be a nice view, except it appears to my bleary eyes that this building is set back further inland than what's there now. Is that correct, Mr. Canal?
Significantly. Some of those structures now are only 40 feet off of the bluff. And so we're going back over, the house itself, the glass face is almost 220 feet back. So the new basement wall will define that 209-foot bluff top limit. So yeah, you'd have to be pretty far out probably to be able to see it.
Yeah, I'll have further comments I want to make. I'll save them for deliberations. But I'm kind of pleased that this shows how one can live with our coastal resiliency ordinance that we adopted a few years ago, without any comment by the public, by the way. But it shows how really a major effort can live with that and do a good job. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to stress that the owner is absolutely loves this property, and the wildlife and the natural, his intent to keep it just a natural area like More Mesa is today. Is really a wonderful thing that we have somebody who is a steward of the land and willing to do something like this.
Commissioner Bartley?
Go ahead. I defer to Commissioner Cooney.
I just, I appreciate having you come all the way up here with us. Haven't seen you before the Planning Commission some time, but glad you had a substitute opportunity. I just have to comment that I have a bit of whiplash having spent the last few months on affordable housing projects to suddenly be presented with the various features here, none of which I think are affordable to anybody I know.
No.
So I'm really aware of the width and breadth of projects that come before the Planning Commission, and the owner is certainly fortunate to have you taking care of that.
Thank you.
I just had one question, and then more during deliberations. Did you or your client have any outreach from the Moore Mesa Preservation Coalition, which used to be very active and very anti-development, and I don't know that that would insult them, but they were very active about 15, 20 years ago. So did you guys have any overlap with, I mean, I don't know what they read.
We haven't. I mean, early on, certainly the Hope Branch Association, through their architectural board, has looked at this a number of times, and there was initially concern about what visibility there would be from Moore Mesa, and we spent a lot of time with that. Part of this application, by the way, is to construct or complete the construction of an 8-foot fence that runs along Moore Mesa, and that was something that was subject to a lot of review from an aesthetic standpoint, but it's a black non-climb fence, and it's being planted continuously behind it. So I think the reality is it really is its relationship to Moore Mesa is really pretty soft.
Okay, great. That was my only question. Thank you. Oh, I know. Wait, one more. Your client, obviously a very visionary guy. What is his background? I mean, was he? What is his background? Did he work for the space shuttle or something? I mean,
No, he has certainly been in the high tech world up in Silicon Valley. Although he's lived down here for 20 years, he's had a couple of companies, but he is a remarkable human being. He's probably one of the funniest people I know and one of the smartest people I know, and just absolutely, as I said, just cherishes this land and has this vision of this house where he is within it and surrounded by it. And I feel very lucky to, be a part of that process.
that's all.
Well, yeah, so that concludes your presentation.
That concludes my presentation.
And I don't know if there's any public comment, if anybody has submitted.
We have not received any public slips for this item, and we do not have anybody online.
Okay, and staff has nothing to add, or? Okay, then we'll take this into deliberations then. Anyone want to start?
I would actually love to hear from the other commissioners. I have a couple of comments to make as we head into a motion, but interested in everyone else's comments.
Commissioner Part.
Yes, I try to be consistent, and Mr. Cannell, you might have noticed that when Jeff Shelton's project on Mission Hills came in front of us, I teased him about going outside of the box that so many architects find themselves in that regularly practice in the city of Santa Barbara. And Jeff had a bit of modern architecture as opposed to Moorish whimsy modifying Spanish colonial Santa Barbara. And of course, I've known you for decades and seen your struggle to fit everything within that box. And to see this coming out of your office is that shows us old guys still have some tricks, right? So I just had to tease you about that. But there's a serious element to that, because I notice as I wander through the landscape that often there's a really jarring kind of interface between the unbuilt environment and the built environment. And it's sometimes it's not this organic farm architecture next to fields. It's just that somebody put up some kind of house at some point and ancillary structures, and then here's Moore Mesa. And this thing strikes me as something that really fits More Mesa, sort of a sweeping vista of More Mesa and sweeping vistas out of this house, and it's sort of Spartan in its features. It's not dotted with all sorts of ancillary structures and so forth. I think that's something that we should applaud, and so I do applaud that. And I think there are members of the Planning Commission that think that we should have a post-construction tour just to see that all of the conditions that are imposed have been met. So I want you to keep that in mind. And maybe Parks Division wants to do that as well, it sounds like. Okay.
Commissioner Reed.
Yeah, I would second Commissioner Park's recommendation on a post-construction tour. But, I was very impressed with such a modern structure, such a creative structure, but actually designed in such a way that it appears the impact on the view will be quite minimal. Appreciate the creativity and the opportunity to actually address such a project. So, indeed, looking at the design, I know it's designed to be quite compliant in favor of, in relation to bluff erosion. It almost looks like it's more likely to take wing with the open and airy design and the cantilevered roofs. So looks like a real asset. My only concern is all these little steps along the entryway in rendering one, concerning how you're going to mow and trim around each of those. But I guess it's not going to be the owner's problem. But no, nonetheless, I would like to echo what I noted was the Board of Architectural Review's final word, exemplary. So with that, I would say I would be, fully inclined to make a vote to allow it to move ahead.
Commissioner Cooney, if you have anything.
Really, no. I do think this is a hallmark project that will inspire others to consider the methods of addressing our energy concerns. We have many examples of high energy using projects that are affordable by very few citizens in our county, but this is a use that addresses, as others have indicated, and especially our BAR, the possibility that you can think outside the box and come up with a project that would be successful and still a place you'd want to be. So I'm positive the vote will be in favor, and I'd like to be on the favored side.
That's very good input and right along my ideas. So with that, I don't have anything more to add other than a request for a site visit once it's done. I know where you work, Brian. I'm going to come after you. So with that, I would actually be happy to make a motion to recommend, well, per the staff's recommendation, that we approve case number 23 CDH 0007 for approval of a coastal development permit in compliance with section 35100. Make the required findings for approval of the project as specified in attachment A of the staff report, including all CEQA findings. Adopt the final mitigated negative declaration 24 NGD 0002 as attachment C in our packet, and adopt the mitigation monitoring program in that document as also contained in the conditions of approval, and approve the project case 23 CDH 007 and 23 DVP 0009, subject to the conditions included as attachments B1 and B2. That's my motion.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
Commissioner Reed.
Oh, sorry. I'll second.
Commissioner Reed recognizes a second. If we can just call it to a vote.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley, and Chair Martinez.
I'll abstain because I wasn't here during deliberations, but
Okay. Vote carries 4-0.
thank you. So I take it we'll have the next matter, and it's Of course, I arrived late, but let's just take a 5-minute break. Thank you. All right, well, welcome back. And we are here moving on to our second action item on our agenda, which is, if you could, please.
So the hearing on the request of the Santa Barbara County Community Service Department Parks Division to consider the following. Recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors of case number 23 SPP 0001 for amendments of Rice Ranch specific plan in compliance with the Land Use and Development Code LUDC Chapter 35.88.
Thank you. And your staff?
Hi.
Oh, any ex-parte communications? No, this matter. Commissioner Park?
Well, sort of. I should know the answer by now. This is a Ms. Richardson question. Are we supposed to disclose our contacts with county staff people? Like when I speak to Mr. Lindgren of Community Services, which I do a lot, is that something I need to report or not? I guess I've just reported it, so.
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner
I'd still
Park.
like to know the answer.
Generally, it's not. This one's interesting, though, because CSD is the applicant. So to the extent you have any ex parte with parks, that's not included in the materials.
Okay, well then, we did speak after the last hearing, I think, about this project.
Commissioner Reed?
Yeah, actually, Commissioner Park asked my first question, which I always wondered about staff, but I also spoke to Jeff Lindgren about the lighting project after our last meeting.
And seeing none? Okay, well, staff now.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Get the PowerPoint up there in just a second. There we go. My name is Tina Mitchell, and today I'll be presenting the Orcutt Community Park Sports Field Lighting Project. This project is a request by the Parks Division of the Community Services Department. So we have representatives from their department here as well and on Zoom to help out with any questions about the lighting. I'll generally refer to the Parks Division throughout this presentation as County Parks. The project is a request to make amendments to the Rice Ranch specific plan that will allow County Parks to install permanent lighting at Orcutt Community Park. These amendments are necessary because the Rice Ranch specific plan did not account for lighting at Orcutt Community Park. The park operations and uses will remain the same with the proposed amendments because local sports leagues have been using portable generator-powered lighting during months with limited evening light for at least the last 5 years. I'll go into more detail on the proposed amendments and existing use of light as we go through the presentation. The LUDC states that amendments to a specific plan shall be processed in the same manner as the original specific plan. So the proposed amendments are before your commission today for a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. County Parks is required to amend the specific plan based on state government code requirements, which state that any public works project within a specific plan area be consistent with that plan. Future build-out of the lighting is not subject to Planning Commission recommendation or board approval. However, any lighting installed by County Parks will be subject to compliance with the amended specific plan. So quickly, here's a little background on the Rice Ranch specific plan. It was originally approved by the Board of Supervisors in December 2003. Then in January 2016, the board approved amendments to the specific plan. It covers an approximately 560-acre area with 725 dwelling units among 5 different neighborhoods. And it also includes around 336 acres of open space area, trails, pocket parks, and the Orcutt Community Park, which is where our focus is for this project. On this map, generally all development that you see below or south of Rice Ranch Road and Stubblefield Road is the Rice Ranch specific plan area. And then Orchid Community Park is outlined here in yellow. It's an approximately 26-acre public county park located at the southern end of Bradley Road. It's zoned rec, and within the park, there's about 5.5 acres of baseball and soccer fields. As previously mentioned, local sports leagues have been using portable generator-powered lighting, like what you see here, for at least the last 5 years during winter months when the sun sets early. It's a little hard to see here, but these lights are raised and lowered with a hand crank and a telescoping pole when they're in use. The proposed specific plan amendments consist of changes to the design guidelines and the open space management plan. We've specified that lighting in Orchid Community Park for the sports fields will have a maximum height of 60 feet. We removed language that excludes lighting from the park, and we specified that any lighting in the park is subject to the specific plan's design guidelines for exterior lighting, and that includes things like low intensity, low glare design, hooded fixtures that direct light downwards. There's a detailed breakdown of the amendments included with attachment C of the staff report. This is the conceptual lighting plan that County Parks provided to staff to help guide the amendments and environmental review for the project. This is showing 14 fixtures surrounding the sports field in red, 35 low-level walkway lights in yellow and orange, a little hard to see there, and then 29 parking lot fixtures in purple. All lighting seen here would be used on a limited basis, generally when daylight savings is not in effect, and there would be a timer control that turns them all off by 9 p.m. The proposed amendments are consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan as well as the Orchid Community Plan. The staff report includes a detailed consistency analysis of all applicable policies as well as findings for board approval of the project. For environmental review, staff prepared an addendum to the previously certified SEIR that was prepared for the Rice Ranch specific plan. None of the conditions in CEQA guidelines section 15162 that call for a subsequent environmental document have occurred. The addendum includes analysis of visual resources and bioresources, since these are the only issue areas where there's a change in the impact analysis. The baseline for our environmental review accounts for the existing consistent use of portable lighting at the park. Impacts to visual resources and bioresources will not be more severe with the amendments because they require that lighting in Orchid Community Park comply with the design guidelines for exterior lighting that's set out in the specific plan. The conceptual lighting plans provided by County Parks do comply with the design guidelines, and they also included photometric drawings that show the lighting being directed downwards with no spillover to open space or neighboring properties. Use of the lighting will be limited to when daylight savings is not in effect and the shouldering months in spring and fall, and they will turn off each night by 9 p.m. All of this is consistent with the current use of portable lighting. Staff also reviewed a biological report, which concludes that impacts to wildlife are unchanged. In conclusion, the proposed amendments to the Rice Ranch specific plan are consistent with the comprehensive plan and the Orchid Community Plan. Therefore, staff recommends that your commission make a recommendation to the board to make the required findings for approval of the project and determine that no subsequent environmental document is required. Staff also recommends that the commission adopt the resolution included as attachment C of the staff report to document the commission's recommendations. The full text of our recommendations are on the slide, and that will conclude staff's presentation. We're available for any questions, and then we also have County Park staff here as well.
Thank you, staff, for that presentation. Any questions of staff? Commissioner Reed.
Just to clarify, we're not here to actually approve the lighting plan. We are here to approve modifications to the specific plan that will permit Parks and Recreation to install that lighting plan, since normally in other areas without specific plans, they can do that without any review. So we're not here to really look at the elements of the plan, although it's attractive, but just to approve the amendments. Is that correct?
Commissioner Reed, through the chair, yes, that's correct. The project before you today is amendments to the specific plan, and the plans that were provided by County Parks are just demonstrative of what we might see out there. We used them to perform our CEQA analysis and help guide the amendments that we made to the specific plan. Yeah, and the board actually approves the amendments. Thank you, Shannon.
Commissioner Briley?
I just had a question for historical context. Does anybody understand why the specific plan didn't have this permanent lighting allowed?
Chair Martinez, Commissioner Bridley, members of the commission. At the time, it's unclear, but they wanted to, I think, exclude it from their environmental analysis, and there wasn't lighting allowed in any of the parks. However, when you actually look into the EIR and the impact analysis that was done, there isn't a specific reason that it's excluded. So, without the context of being there at the time, it's hard to say, but we did consider all of the prior impact analysis when we prepared the addendum.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Park?
You've got, pardon me if you've already addressed this, because sometimes my mind tends to wander during presentations on something that I know I support. But I would imagine that these portable generator-driven lights are not state-of-the-art electronics for the lights, that they generate noise and generate, I suppose, diesel or gas pollution. I wonder if you or Mr. Lindgren could compare how these new lights represent the latest technology and how they're powered and what efficiencies that we will have and benefits to the neighborhood.
Chair Martinez, Commissioner Park, Jeff Lindgren with Santa Barbara County Parks. Hope you're all well this morning. Yes, the proposal is to install pretty much state-of-the-art LED lighting on the 14 poles that will be located on the sports fields in Orchid Community Park. The current generators are diesel-driven. They do smell while they're running. They require that diesel be transported to the site where the generators are located. So there's a possibility of some spillage there that we would be eliminating by making this change to LED lighting. The lighting will be driven by upgraded power supply to the park. A new panel will be installed within the restroom building that's in the park that will support the new light fixtures, but they'll all be LED. LED lights now have very sophisticated controls, so we can control when they're on, when they're off. They can be ratcheted down from 100% power down to 50% power, 25% power to signal that the park is closing and it's time to head home. So all those features are built into this new system. It'd be a great advantage for the recreational users out at the park. And they provide much better lighting than having 4 portable generators sitting on the field. So it'll be a benefit for everyone.
Well, this will be easier for the public to access and use, won't it?
Yes, easier to access and just improved recreational resource overall.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cooney.
Mr. Lindgren, thank you for coming and explaining this. And your last points about the control of the lighting was something I wondered about, because I've been in ballparks when the lights are bright and everybody's playing, the game ends, and all of a sudden everything goes black, and you have to sort of feel your way back to the parking lot. And it sounds like this will obviate that situation.
Yes, Chair Martinez, Commissioner Cooney. Yes, we're not exactly positive on how we will structure it, but with the LED lighting, as soon as you flip the switch, so to speak, the lights come on. It's not like old traditional stadium lighting where it takes half hour, 45 minutes for the lights to warm up and really reach full power. And the same is true on the other side. You can turn them off and they go off. So with these sophisticated controls, we certainly can control how they dim as the time to close the park approaches.
And I just have one last question. And in regards to those lights that were formerly used, or at least being used now, did they go up to the extent of the 60 feet that we're talking about here, or were they quite a bit lower?
Chair Martinez, the portable lights, I do not believe they extend to 60 feet. That would be very tall for the structure. So they would not be as tall as what we plan to install. I will make the point, though, that 60 feet is roughly about half the height of what you see at a more traditional
like a high
football
school
field, like high school stadium. Those can be 120 to 200 feet tall. So this is much lower than that. And the color of the light fixtures and the poles themselves is going to be a bronze color, so it'll really blend in with the environment. I think your local high school, one of them has galvanized steel light fixtures, which kind of stick out visually.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I just have one request for public comment, and that is Mr. Steve Strachan.
History of my involvement with parks. I started with parks in about 1980 and resigned from Santa Barbara County as Ranger 3 at Waller Park in 2000. After that, I built parks for 20 years, one of which was Orchid Community Park. I now serve as Park Commissioner for D4, but I'm here speaking as Steve Strachan, not representing the Park Commission, to make that clear. So the increased growth of the Orchid area has caused more demand on our existing facilities. The proposed project is an effective way to increase the available usage of an existing facility. In addition to that, the data that's coming out of the Rec Master Plan surveys shows an increased demand for sports fields in our area. This is a way that we can do this without trying to acquire more land and build new parks. It's just making use of what we have. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And staff have anything to add?
Chair Martinez, nothing to add at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Reed, we're in deliberation. No. So I guess it comes back to us right now for deliberations in relation to this, but anybody would like to make a comment? Commissioner Parton?
I just wanted to thank Mr. Strachan for appearing. And I think it's really great to have the D4 representative from the Parks Commission here, whether it's their official position or not. I appreciate having your input. And you made a point that I thought was a really good one, that with the Rec Master Plan, which we can pay a lot more attention to now that we've done the housing element, we're looking to expand recreational opportunities for the public. And that's not just by buying more land or building new parks. It's taking the ones we already have and making them more available. And this one does. I know there's protocols now for getting those generators turned on and getting lighting. I imagine it's a pain in the neck. I think it's going to be much easier for the public to go there for scheduled games, for soccer practice, and the other kinds of things. And this is... I'm sure there's a large cost to this, but it's well worth it because it's like adding a new park in the evening for the public. So I'm glad Mr. Strachan pointed that out, perhaps more briefly and more eloquently than I just did, but it's a good point. Thank you.
Commissioner Reed, did you want
Yes. Okay. I look at this plan. I know Orchid Community Park is a great benefit, gets a great deal of usage, both because as a link to the dog park, to the community trails, and the many, many people who use it strictly for recreation, as well as the sports community who uses these fields. I look at the lighting plan as presented, and I will borrow a word from our prior case. I would like to use the word exemplary for its design and execution in providing, I think, far greater utility, even safety. When you look at, we'll also provide lighting for the pathway between the sports fields to the parking lot, as well as lighting in the parking lot without causing any environmentally deleterious effects. It's well designed, using the most modern standards. And final benefit, I would see, it allows the replacement of a number of noisy, smelly, greenhouse gas belching generators for a greatly improved and much more harmonious system. So again, our action is to approve the modifications to specific plan as included in attachment A. I would very enthusiastically support this, and I'm prepared to do so with my vote.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Park, Commissioner Reed. And seeing that no other commissioners have comments, why don't we just call us for a vote? Or Commissioner Kennedy, do you have a comment?
No, just ready to vote.
Okay.
So Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner Briley,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
and Chair Martinez,
Aye.
and the vote carries 5-0.
Thank you. So with that, yeah, like things like that. So now we'll move on to our third and final item on our agenda today.
So the hearing on the request of Thomas Kopnick, property owner, to consider the following. Case number 23 CUP 0006 for 3.8 acres of outdoor cannabis cultivation in compliance with section 35.21.30.
Okay. And as we're entering this section, and before we get to staff, I am going to have to recuse myself since I have some personal knowledge through my profession as an attorney regarding these properties. Thank you. So Commissioner Briley will take over as chair.
Oh, there you go. Nice to see you.
Hello, goodbye.
What an active morning. Alrighty, so I think at this point we would read this item into the record. Do we have your help with that? Right. Oh, you just did? I'm not paying attention. All right, then we actually go to our Brown Act disclosures and comments from the commission on that matter. Does anybody have a Brown Act disclosure or not seeing any? Then let's go to our staff report. Oh, there she is. Hello.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Commission. We have Willow Brown here this morning to present the TAT project.
Good morning, Commissioners. I will be presenting the TAT Ventures LLC Cannabis Cultivation Project. The 360.75 acre subject property is zoned Ag 2100 and is located at 2401 South Highway 101 in the Buellton area, 3rd Supervisorial District. The operation will be located on only 9 acres of the parcel. There are 2 approved cannabis operations located directly north of the project site, highlighted in green on this map. This photo shows the view of the project site from Highway 101. The project site has been cultivated with vegetable and hay crops for several decades and is currently a fallow crop field. The project is a request for a conditional use permit to allow 3.83 acres of outdoor cannabis cultivation and 10-foot tall hoop structures. No processing will occur on site. All harvested cannabis will be immediately transferred off-site in refrigerated vans for processing by a third party. Other proposed development includes 2 120-square-foot secure sheds, 7 5,000-gallon water storage tanks, and 4 100-square-foot shade structures. The cultivation area will be fenced with 8-foot wire deer fencing. Lighting will be installed on 10-foot tall poles that will be hooded and directed downward. The project proposes new landscaping to fully screen the operation within 5 years. The operation will include a maximum of 5 year-round full-time employees and a maximum of 12 seasonal employees during planting and harvesting periods. There will be 3 planting and harvesting periods per year lasting 3 months each. Hours of operation will be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, with expanded hours during harvesting and planting of 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Water for irrigation will be provided by an existing on-site agricultural water well. This is a site plan of the proposed project. The property will be accessed from Caltrans dedicated turn lanes off Highway 101. The access was reviewed by Caltrans, and the existing roads were determined to be adequate to support project traffic. As shown on the site plan, Nahoe Creek is located to the west of the project site. The edge of the riparian vegetation is 90 feet from the project fence at the closest point. However, there is an additional 10-foot buffer between the fence and the area of cultivation so that there will be a minimum buffer of 100 feet. Additionally, there's an almost vertical embankment in this area with a height of approximately 30 feet that provides additional buffer. The project also proposes a 1 to 2 foot berm area between the development and the fence to further ensure there will be no impacts to the creek or riparian vegetation. The proposed landscape plan consists of coast live oak trees, California laurel, coffeeberry, toyon, and lemonade berry. Landscaping is proposed along the eastern edge of the property site adjacent to Highway 101. This simulation shows the proposed screening from Highway 101 within 5 years. The proposed project is consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan, including the land use element, the agricultural element, and the conservation element. The project is consistent with policies regarding adequate services, hillside and watershed protection, and protection of visual resources, agricultural resources, and groundwater resources. The project site is not within a groundwater basin, and the project will utilize a private water well. The proposed 3.83 acres of cannabis cultivation will require significantly less water than the vegetable crops that were previously grown on the project site. Additionally, the well was tested by a certified engineering geologist and hydrogeologist who confirmed that the well is more than capable of providing the water use demands. The proposed project is consistent with standards of the Land Use and Development Code, including the Ag 2 Zone District standards and the Cannabis Ordinance. The proposed project includes a landscaping and screening plan to screen the project from public viewing areas, a lighting plan consisting of motion sensor light fixtures, a plan for fencing the cannabis premises, a site transportation demand management plan to reduce vehicle trips to the site, and a habitat protection plan in compliance with the PEIR. The project relies on the PEIR prepared for the Cannabis Land Use Ordinance and Licensing Program pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15162, as documented by the written checklist prepared pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15168. The checklist is included as Attachment C to the staff report. No additional environmental review is required. Staff recommends that your commission make the required findings for approval included in Attachment A, determine that the PEIR is adequate and no additional environmental review is needed, and grant approval of the project subject to the conditions included as Attachment B. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff and the applicant are available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Do we have questions from the commission? I am Commissioner Reed.
Are we going to get to this one at some point? Okay.
That's applicants, yeah.
I have a few questions. With respect, my principal concern would be proximity to Nahoe Creek and the prospect of, water containing fertilizer getting into the creek. But I have a First, with respect to slope, I mean, that land has modest slope, but would water flow toward the creek or toward the highway with respect to the slope? If there was a large volume that would happen to be expressed.
Chair Bradley, Commissioner Reed, the project site is relatively flat. The average slope is approximately 4%, and the project site is ranging from 100 to 257 feet from the edge of the riparian vegetation.
Okay, another question. You mentioned relative to the buffer zones near the creek, there's also a berm that's going to be constructed. It says a 1 to 2 foot berm. I was wondering what the cross section of that berm is going to look like. Is it going to be a simple little mound? Is it going to be wider with a flat top? Because my concern is if you just berm is not a tremendously useful description. If it's just a normal, like a conical in cross section, I think it'd be, far more subject to repeated erosion due to rain and things. Whereas wider, more robust with a flat top, I think it would be far more durable. So my question is, do you have any other information with respect to the design and the execution of that berm?
Chair Bradley, Commissioner Reed, the berm is proposed to be a straw wattle, which is ranging from typically 8 to 12 inches in height, and then
I also just wanted to add that the project has been reviewed by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, which has requirements related to runoff into creeks, and the project is compliant with all applicable requirements. Also, per state regulations, cannabis projects, there are a lot of limitations to the types of fertilizers and pesticides that can be used, so that impacts the runoff as well. So all of that has been analyzed by CDFW, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and also the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Okay, thank you. Now with respect to, I accept the water use estimates. I mean, it might be more intense than grain, but it's a much smaller footprint, so I'm okay with the overall water use. I do have a couple of questions about the drip system, though. Now, these plants, are they going to be planted, are they going to be in pots or in ground?
Chair Bradley, Commissioner Reed, they're proposed to be in pots.
Okay, so then they're going to be fed with respect to the drip system. You can have individual emitters in each pot? Okay. I noticed in the design for the drip system, it mentioned they are going to be sensors to detect loss of pressure or increase of volume in the system. I would imagine, well, I've seen it happen way too many times in my home systems. A union or a joint breaks, so all of a sudden your drip system becomes much more robust, and you have water flowing you have to control. Does this system feature some sort of automatic cutoff feature in the event it does detect a pressure drop?
Commissioner Reed, through the chair. So our LUDC standards require that the project includes a water efficiency management plan, which the project has complied with. That specific question about the details of how the emitters work and whether there's a kind of pressure regulator that might shut off automatically, I think that's something that we can ask the applicant. They're here. They can address that question.
Okay. Then, one more question with respect to the odor abatement. It appears based on your attachment as far as the odor abatement plan. It's a MMAQ5 odor abatement plan, because this site, is it correct that since this site only represents 3.83 acres out of a 9-acre site, it's under 51%, so that would not apply?
Chair Bradley, Commissioner Reed, that's correct. Since it's in the Ag 2 zone and isn't adjacent to an EDRN or the urban-rural boundary and is less than 51% of the lot area, it doesn't require an odor abatement plan, and it's also only cultivation and not processing, and the cannabis is proposed to be transported off-site right after processing. So yes, an odor abatement plan is not required.
Okay, and just one final question at this point. although I know the ultimate conclusion after the biological report is that no natural habitat or sensitive species will be disturbed or threatened by this operation. I did note in the one public comment letter we had from WeWatch, and I usually review all the public comment letters, they make reference to a prior report of one red-legged frog being described in the creek some 1 mile north of the development, and that would be upstream from the development. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That would be upstream. And again, one 5-year-old sighting, and that sighting comes from the California Natural Diversity Database as cited. Are you familiar with how sightings and information gets incorporated in the California Natural Diversity Database? They accept entries from professionals, from educators, almost from the public, and they're admitted to the database, normally without any great degree of scientific rigor in verifying that. So I'm thinking about the adverse drug reaction database that FDA uses. It's very similar. They take almost any entry from any source, add it to the database. So I would think the evidentiary value of that as an element to really affect a project with a single 5-year-old sighting, the evidentiary value would be flimsy at best, further modified by the fact it was upstream. So my view on that one. So the question was basically almost rhetorical, but just want to know if you had any other independent knowledge of that, since it seems to be akin to the same credibility as entries in Wikipedia.
Commissioner Reed, through the chair, maybe it stumped me a little bit on that one. I think if we get a hit, I agree with in generally what you're saying. If we do get a hit, we err on the side of caution, and that's why the biological report looks into it, any sort of hits that come up with these databases, so we can make sure that we're not impacting any sensitive species.
But in the end, what Fish and Wildlife and other government sources have agreed that in terms of potential biological impact, there are none.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Park?
Yes, I have a number of questions. And some of my questions might be answered in the plans, but, I usually don't review these things until Monday night after the public comment letters have all come in, unless somebody brings it to my attention, either the applicant or a member of the public. And no one contacted me. That's why I didn't make any ex parte contact. So I reviewed this yesterday. I was in New Cuyama all Monday. And so I read it over and over, but I may have missed something. So one thing that I have a question about, and it's a question I've been asking since we considered the hoop house ordinance in not 1919, it seems like that, doesn't it? But 2019. And it's the drainage off the top of the hoop houses. This is not rain falling on soil. This is rain falling on sheets of plastic, which are impermeable, and the water's got to go somewhere. So we'll have approximately 4 acres of hoop houses. Obviously, there's some interstices in between them, but where does the stormwater go?
Chair Bradley, Commissioner Park, the project was reviewed by County Flood Control and Project Clean Water, and they had no conditions on the project. It is permeable surfaces around the hoop houses, and so it should absorb into the ground.
Is that a study somebody's made that it should absorb into the ground? I mean, anybody that's been alive in the last 2 years has realized we have episodic rains here. And I know we had a recent incident of hoop houses being destroyed in floods and causing flooding and so forth. So I'm going to want a better answer to the question, to tell you the truth, than it should be absorbed by the surrounding soil. Is there a drainage facility on this? I mean, this is something we designed into the hoop house ordinance, so I would hope there's a plan for where the storm waters go as they pour off the hoop houses, and maybe there isn't, and then that'll be something I take into account.
Commissioner Park, we'll look into that. I don't recall this as an issue coming up on any project before in terms of stormwater runoff from hoops on currently ag cultivated land. I think the assumption is it falls off the hoop and it's ground, dirt, and it does get absorbed, but I can see if we ask that question of these reviewing agencies, I just don't recall that being asked of these reviewing agencies.
I think if you ask that question of many of the farmers that we have here in the Santa Maria Valley, they have experience with that, and it's not something they ignore or pretend doesn't exist. But here we are. So let me move on then. I noticed there's a landscape plan in reference to screening along 101, okay? And that's for these 4 acres of hoop houses. One thing I noted in the landscape plan, there's reference to heights of the shrubs, 30 feet for toyon, 30 feet for lemonade berry, 15 feet for coffee berry. I could go on all day about my own experience in botany and wandering around this county looking at plants, and I've rarely ever seen specimens of any of those species that come anywhere near those heights. Where did that all come from?
Chair Bradley, Commissioner Park. The landscape plan was done by a certified landscape architect and was stamped off by them, and that's our ordinance requirement. And the maximum height of development on site will be 10 feet. And yeah, the proposed project should be screened within 5 years by the proposed landscaping.
So we have no independent verification of that other than the representation of a landscape architect hired by the applicant, correct?
That's right. We rely on the expert landscape architect to sign off on the plans.
Now,
and the plants will be irrigated, so they would presumably reach a higher height than a native plant growing just in the wild. They would potentially grow taller. I think that's the idea.
Well, the experience of many of us who've sat on the Botanic Garden Board, like myself, and gone on expeditions finding native plants and growing native plants, is that sometimes when one waters, that's the quickest way to kill a native plant. And watering those oak trees isn't going to help them out. It's going to hurt them. But let me move on to views. Well, this is part of the views. It appears that on the landscape plan, the screening is along the highway, okay, which makes sense. And there's screening on the grow that's immediately to the north of this. But I don't see any screening along the north and south ends. And I know from driving that on a near constant basis and having grown up driving around that and hiking the Gaviota Peak Trail and riding the trails at Las Cruces, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are views of that property from both the north and the south. That happens the way the highway kind of snakes around, okay? And so I'm trying to wonder what will screen the ends of those hoop houses, especially when coming from the south, because one thing that you can't see from the two-dimensional plans that are submitted in our packet is that there's a grade trending from the south to the north here, going downhill. Okay, you've gone over that summit. That's why you're on Nahui Creek as opposed to Gaviota Creek. And do we have any view studies or studies of height perspectives? I mean, I've got my own from looking at Google Earth and my own experience, but it'd be better if something's actually in the record.
Commissioner Park, through the chair. So the applicant provided simulations in their landscape plan that show their essentially little view studies. Here we go. Actually, Willa pulled it up. That show the views from the highway from different areas, and the north and the south. At least the north is included. I don't think there's a view shed shown from the south, and that's because there's existing vegetation there along the highway that screens the site already.
Well, I wouldn't have asked if, because I've seen this on the staff reports. I'm asking for view studies beyond this because these view studies are from right adjacent to the project from the eastern side. But like I said, you've got a grade where you're much higher coming from the south, and you look right down the throat of those things. And I'm wondering if we've got a view study. And if we don't, we don't.
There's not a view study beyond what's submitted in the landscape plans.
Okay, then we'll have to kind of go from what we hear in public comment and our own personal experience. And like I say, you can go to Google Earth and you can see what the grade is. You can see, for example, that the grade level of the Grow is 10 feet below the north side of the highway, immediately adjacent to it. It's just the way the slope works. So we'll get into that later then. Do we have any other cannabis grows with hoop houses of this extent next to 101? I'm trying to think of where we have that in the county. I'm talking about cannabis. I'm not talking about strawberries and blueberries and all those things we have here in the Santa Maria Valley, but cannabis.
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of our head if we have any other similar grows like this, but we can do some research on that now and get back to you.
Yeah, I mean, we're all aware of the hoop houses you can see from 101 in the Los Alamos area, but they're set back for a mile. They're not next to it. Okay, let me move on. Wildlife movement, there's a reference in the biological assessment that there would be no interference with wildlife movement across the site. And I kind of couldn't understand that, and I'm not even sure if there's a consequence to whether it matters. And that is, how is it that with 8-foot fencing surrounding the site and hoop houses, we have no interference with wildlife movement? Is that something that anybody's addressed other than this, whoever wrote the biological assessment report? I mean, I've recently been on a cannabis grow in New Cuyama where they've got a 150-foot wide wildlife corridor through the fencing, and yet here appears to be nothing to me.
Commissioner Park, through the chair, I think my answer to that would be, we do consult with trained biologists, and I'm going to, as a non-biologist, my understanding of it is the wildlife movement is mostly focused on the water corridor of the creek. That would be the primary avenue from which wildlife would travel. This is set back significantly from the creek, and so what we look for is an expert to say, in the field, can you make sure that there's no impact to the wildlife movement? So that's what we got on that one.
It's interesting. You go spend time with Doug Campbell from Coastal Resource Conservancy and others, and the wildlife crossings in the 101 area and in that corridor and in that somewhat narrow valley receive a great deal of attention. So I'm just looking at the broader perspective. The water pumping and the property right adjacent to this to the north, that's a project that we heard, was it last year? Was it 2 years ago? I can't remember. Mr. Siemens will remember, he was there. 2021, okay. And there was a great deal of discussion of to make long story short, pumping limits, okay? And that was included in the conditions, I believe. And we looked at it very carefully. And I see no reference to any of that kind of condition in this project. Is that right? There is no pumping limit that's imposed as part of this?
Chair Bradley, Commissioner Park, we reviewed the water memo for compliance with, and it reduced the water use by approximately fourfold, and there's not currently a condition on the project related to that.
Commissioner Park, if I could add something to that through the chair. So on previous projects, when we've gone about this two ways. If there's a threshold in a basin, we get analysis to see what the expected water use is against that threshold. And sometimes we also add historical use data. So again, this is a historically used agricultural area, and the water memo that was provided shows that what they're going to be doing is significantly lower than what was there before. In cases like that, we do not add pumping restrictions to a project.
Well, I'm just curious, how does that differ from the project that was like 100 feet from this, that also had a major discussion of reduction of usage by change of crop type, and it's the same basin. I can't believe it's a different basin, being a few feet away, and it was something that we heavily scrutinized and resulted in a pumping limit.
Yeah, without knowing exactly which project, because we're just kind of winging it a little bit here, that well, I believe that you're talking about was actually in the creek. And so it was drawing water from a different source, and therefore we looked at it differently than we would at this well. And that's why there's pumping restrictions on that well.
Well, you look at that, there are actually three wells that were discussed in that other project.
Correct, yeah.
Well, if we're not there, we're not there, so I'll move on. This is a question more for perhaps Ms. Richardson. Our status of the law is different now than it was when we considered the last project, because now we are require a CUP for every outdoor grow. Is that correct?
Chair Bradley and Commissioner Park, I was looking to planning just to confirm, because sometimes there's lots of exceptions to these, but I believe that's correct.
And so now we all have that for every one of these projects. We have our infamous condition 2 or finding 2.1.5 regarding detrimental to the neighborhood, whatever it says, and compatibility. So it's something, a finding we have to make in an affirmative sense. Is that correct?
Chair Bradley and Commissioner Park, that's correct, to approve the project.
Okay. I think it's kind of like obvious to 99% of the people in this room that yes, the cannabis ordinance from 2018 does not require abatement studies or abatement plans for Ag 2 properties. But now we have a change in the law where we require CUPs and we have to make this finding, okay? Does that, one, allow us to deny projects for lack of abatement, odor abatement, because it violates that finding? And two, can we condition projects to require odor abatement in order to make that finding, notwithstanding the fact that the cannabis ordinance itself does not require an abatement plan?
Chair Bradley and Commissioner Park, so whether the findings can be made is within the discretion of the commission, and if you believe there are odor issues to the extent that it's detrimental to the neighborhood and you're not able to make that finding, you have discretion to either not make the finding, which would deny the project, or potentially condition it in a way that you would be able to make the finding and approve it.
I thought so. And then I know you in County Counsel's office spend more time than I do watching what the board is up to, because my only access sometimes is what I hear from constituents or read in the paper, but you're there. The board is now considering odor control again in modifying the cannabis ordinance. Is that not correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Park, the Planning Development did go to the board a month or so ago with a update on the cannabis enforcement and compliance. Out of that hearing, we received instructions by the board to amend the ordinance in regards to the coastal zoning ordinance. in regards to identifying either measures to monitor odor or where we would measure odor instances to address the the threshold or the trigger for requiring people to improve or update their odor abatement systems. But that ordinance amendment was direction for an ordinance amendment was in the coastal zoning ordinance. At the same hearing, there was a request of staff to look into cannabis odor in the inland areas, but no direction to amend the ordinance in the inland area. It was only to look to see if it was even feasible to do that.
Well, did not Supervisor Hartman, in whose district this lies, express a desire to see control of outdoor grows as to odor, and expressed concern at how that has occurred in her district, or detection of odor, and inquire as to, is there a way to add this into the ordinance?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Park, the request came up. Supervisor Hartman did indicate an interest in examining this, but the final action was not to do an ordinance amendment in the inland area. It was only to look into it and come back and report to the board on our findings as far as if it was feasible or not to require ordinance odor abatement or odor reduction in the inland area. So there was not a direction to do ordinance amendments in the inland area, only to look into it.
Right, and there's no final action by the board on the amendment of the cannabis ordinance as to odor control. Then that's something that we're still awaiting.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, that is correct. The direction was to go and come back, and we would be coming through the Planning Commission. That makes sense. For ordinance amendments related to coastal zoning ordinance for odor control measures. As far as the other instruction, it was only to go back to the board and report on our analysis of odor control systems in the inland area, if it was feasible or not for outdoor grows.
Yeah, thank you. And Commissioner Briley, I'll have more comments later, but I think we should go to public comment if we can before lunch, so I'll stop now.
For all the commissioners' questions to be vetted.
Madam Chair, I think the applicants have a presentation.
I apologize. Yes. How about the applicant's presentation? Thank you. It's from me going back and forth on these chairs 3 times today. Sorry.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and Commissioners. Can you hear me? I guess I've got a big mouth. I probably don't even need this. I'm Kristen Larson. I am a regulatory compliance attorney with Stradling, Carlson, Yucca, and Roth. And I am also the agent for TAT Ventures, LLC, and Tom and Tammy Kopitnik. My clients are here today as well. We'll be happy to answer as many questions as we can and come back to you with anything that we can't immediately answer. I do have a lot of responses, specifically for Commissioner Park and some of the questions that you raised. I think I'll I think most of the information, Willow has done an excellent job, and I will actually take this moment to thank both Gwen and Willow for the guidance. We've been working with them for 3 years now, at least, and we are confident that we've crossed most of our T's, if not all of them, and dotted most of our I's. So, do I need to, is there a button to push to change the slide? Okay, change the slide, please. We've assembled a team that has a lot of experience and expertise, both in this Intermontane area that the project is located in, as well as throughout the county. And specifically, our hydrogeologist and our biologist have spent quite a bit of time working on projects specifically in this area and know it quite well. Next slide. This kind of gives you an overview of the site. I believe you're probably, as you said, pretty experienced. It's in a very rural area, predominated by agriculture historically. It's about halfway between the coast and Buellton. And the TAC Ranch is approximately 360 acres, and it can really be divided into kind of three main elements. You've got the main ranch area, you've got the sort of backcountry where you can see that ridge right behind the house. That line is where the pipeline that was formerly known as the Plains All-American Pipeline actually runs on the property underneath that ridge line. And then the TAT Ventures grow field. And you can see also the two other cannabis fields right beyond the little ranch road there. The much bigger one is the Nahoe Farms one that you refer to, and then the smaller one where the hoop houses already exist is the Sierra Botanicals. This is just a depiction demonstrating that this field has been in continuous agriculture use for at least 40 years, probably quite a bit longer. The map on the left is an old Landsat map. It's kind of blurry, but you can see that there's agricultural activity on this field. And then up to the present, it's been pretty much continuously cultivated. I think this is actually a good area to demonstrate that there is a couple different aspects. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to come up and point out a few things on the map here, the diagram.
Ma'am, you actually need to be on the mic. Yeah, sorry. We can get you a pointer.
Okay. Well, I just wanted, there's going to be, with the new project, there'll be a buffer at the edge of the field. And you can see there's actually quite a bit of, in some places, up to 250 feet between the field and the riparian area. There'll be significantly more protection afforded by the TAT project to the riparian area because there'll be, as stated, berms and fences, and there'll be quite a bit of open ground before you actually even reach the edge of the embankment, which is covered in brush. So it's not like there's extreme waterways that will be allowed off of the grow area. And also in terms of wildlife corridors, there is that ranch fence actually. The ranch road actually goes down to the creek, and I mean there's ample room on either side of the grow area for wildlife, although there hasn't been any sightings of any large wildlife in this area. Next slide. I think that I think it is quite compelling that there'll be about a 75% reduction in water use with the planned cultivation. And I will also point out that that the Nahoe Farms, we're aware of the appeals that went on, and the well source for the TAT property is a much deeper well, and it's not connected to the same aquifer as the wells that were at issue with grow area. Next slide. We just wanted to point out a couple of the other benefits besides the at least 75% reduction in water use. There's going to be significant vegetative screening along the corridor. I do also want to point out that it's in our client's interest to minimize visibility of the cultivated area. So we definitely take an interest in shielding it from view. That's something that we take seriously. We're not just sort of nonchalantly approaching the screening aspect of the project. There has been a lot of study. This is probably the thing that we've spent the most time on is with the biological resources. There is a significant buffer, as I said, at least ranging from 100 to 250 feet down to the creek with about a 30-foot high embankment that's totally covered in native vegetation and trees. And, I will say that, we are doing odor abatement. We have made a very conscientious determination that plants, upon reaching maturity, will be immediately removed from the site. And that's a significant odor abatement process. And I don't actually think that there's any better odor abatement process that you can do than to remove the plants for trimming and processing off-site. To a inside facility that is set up to capture odors. And then I'll just sort of close by saying that it's a well-resourced project. My clients take regulatory compliance very seriously, and I believe that they've taken a lot of time to get to where they are today, to make sure that their plan is compliant and well organized.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for our applicant? Seeing none. All right. Thank you very much. We have one request for public comment. So in the room, why don't we go with that? Yes, please. Mr. Seaman.
Still on?
Yeah.
Last time I was up in front of you guys, we were talking about worm poop, so we're moving on, I guess. We're back, because the time before that, we were talking about cannabis. I don't have a presentation. I should be out pruning blackberries right now, so I just didn't have time. So I'm going for it. Odor is going to be a challenge. Water, I'm still not sure what the water source is. I'd like to know more about that. I think Fish and Wildlife is not done commenting on this project. I think they will have more to say about it, so I'm not going to get into that at all. More review is needed, starting with the aesthetic visuals. You come down Nahoe grade, and you already see Sierra Botanicals in their hoop houses, and they're not as close to the freeway as this will be. You need 200, 300 foot high barriers to prevent that. So just right out of the bat, I don't see how you do this. On Monday, I filed an appeal opposing Sierra Botanicals' upgrade and capacity increase for their existing cannabis operation. I don't know if it's coincidental, but is it possible that we're getting cannabis from the Kapotnik property? Yes, they're moving off-site into the other neighbor, which has an increased facility. They're increasing their facility capacity by 60%. It's turning the area across the highway right from driveway to driveway. You can take a straight line and go from the opening gate to Santa Barbara Blueberries and the Wild Farmlands Foundation. You go straight in, cannabis to the right, cannabis to the left, cannabis behind. And the wind is coming this way, guys. I will read you what happened on Sunday. Wind advisory, 10 a.m. until 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Wind advisory remains in effect from 10 a.m. this morning to 9 p.m. this evening. Northwest winds 15 to 30 miles per hour with gusts up to 40 miles per hour expected, where Central Coast, San Ynez Valley, Ventura County, etc.
Mr. Seaman, I just want to remind you, you have like 20 seconds left, so
I thought I had more time.
it's 3 minutes, so if you
That-
can wrap.
Okay. Well, we've already talked about that. We have kids across the street from us, across the street from them. We do tarantula trails. We do toad trails. We do docent tours. We have summer school kids from Chumash. We have kids from Santa Barbara Parks and Rec. We have kids from churches. We are year-round putting these community service events on for kids, and we've already had complaints about odor from the small Sierra Botanicals processing and growing.
I'm sorry,
So-
but our time is 3 minutes. But
That's
I
not
think
enough time.
Okay.
And this makes me very angry the way that this is going down. I appreciate what you guys are doing.
I should have told you about the 3 minute before
I
you
should have
started.
known. I thought
It's
someone
okay.
else had 10 minutes. I don't understand the difference.
Well, the applicant normally gets more time than the members
I
of the
don't
public.
know the difference.
Okay.
I'm a farmer.
Okay.
Thank
All right. Thank you for your comments.
And this is not an appeal. This is
No.
different
Yeah.
rules.
So that just remember the public. I mean, we totally got your message. I did anyway. Thank you. Okay. I don't think there's anyone else under public comment. All right. So at this point, we go back to staff and ask if you have anything to elaborate on based on public comment.
We don't have anything to add.
Okay.
Could I add one more thing?
Sure.
It's like a...
You have to go to the mic, though.
Okay, so formally, could Santa Barbara Blueberries and the Wild Farmlands Foundation be considered a sensitive receptor, which is daycare, youth camp, or school? Because of the kids, and our fields are less than 200 feet away.
Okay, thank you for the question. All right, so with that, we want to go back to the applicant in case there was anything, well, do we do that? Yes, okay. Applicant, if you want to have anything to wrap up.
Well, we did want to address the odor. I mean, my clients actually live on the property, and the Sierra Botanics has been their neighbor for, I don't know, has it been 5 years since they've had their operation, and they have never experienced any odor issues, and they would be kind of very concerned if that was an issue. So I think that that's definitely worth considering. And my client Tom he's a retired neurosurgeon, but he has a lot of fun in flying helicopters, and he pays a lot of attention to the wind and the wind direction right in this very area. And I don't know, did you want to make any comment on the wind and the wind direction in this?
I think yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Well, he's had a weather station right in the middle of the field for the last several years, and we have a lot of data on the wind direction and the strength of the wind right in that little micro region. So the project is designed to take advantage of the flow of air across the project.
Okay. Mr. Kopitnik?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Kopitnik. Yes, we want to be good neighbors from the start. We've tried to be good neighbors. We've placed in the field a digital wind monitor for the last 5 years so that we could capture quantitative data of the wind. And although, with all due respect to Mr. Siemens, that area is a unique wind flow because I'm a commercial pilot. It's a very unique wind flow. Just because Santa Ynez or Santa Barbara or Santa Maria is forecasting wind gusts of a certain direction, that wind flows down those hills and it flows down the highway. And so I'm 100% convinced that most of the wind, after wind logging for 5 years of quantitative data, the wind is not going to blow anywhere but more towards our property and south down the 101. It's not going to blow across. The wind doesn't prevail that way. Second of all, the red-legged frog issue, that it's very counterintuitive. When you look at the property, the red-legged frog was downstream, not upstream, because Nahoe Creek flows to the north at that point. And the last point is coming down the grade as a pilot. That's a 2,500-foot drop. There's no way you can screen any field from a perspective of 2,000 feet up in the air. And I don't think that's our requirement. We want to make it nice. We want to make it pleasant. We want to not interfere with our neighbors. And so, but it's ridiculous to think we could screen something from a 2,000-foot elevation that you couldn't see. So just to make those few rebuttal comments.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add one more point of clarification,
Please.
just to reiterate that CDFW has completed their review of the project. They reviewed the water demand and any impacts to special status species, and they've finished reviewing the project.
Okay, with no concerns, and they're able to issue
Correct.
that permit when it needed, okay.
Yep.
All right, so that concludes our public comment and our rebuttal time, and at this point, it's back to our pleasure of discussion or deliberations. Commissioner Reed.
I do have one final question.
Sure.
I noticed in the design you have a 8-foot high deer fence. Is that surrounding that, the grow on every side? So there's not going to be a prospect of an associated deer depredation permit, unlike the thousands of acres of vineyards that are openly operating?
There will not be deer in the project area. Is that
so no depredation permit?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so that brings it back to our commission. Commissioner Park.
You know, I'll be out front. If we had to vote today, I would vote to reject the project because I don't think we can make the finding 2.1.5. And I'm basing that on what I heard today and what I've heard over the years, where I've heard every single other cannabis project and what they claim will happen and won't happen. And I understand the whole argument about not processing on site as abatement, but, you know, there are scents that come from the growth of it. I'm surprised, frankly, by a number of things that I've had no contact on this project from either the applicant or opposition. I actually dug into that a little bit because Folded Hills, which has a tremendous investment in their wine facility not very far away, and they were very concerned about the odor control on the last projects. So I think we can't say that just goes away because the prevailing wind direction is one direction or another. I understand there's a major family health emergency going on there with the ownership, and that's why they're not here today. This is, you know, just an experience with odor. This is a very sensitive issue among our constituents in the 3rd District. It's very sensitive to Supervisor Hartman. It is one where sometimes our experience has been counterintuitive. Some of you may remember the Busy Bee project, okay? And we would go and talk about wind, but when we would go visit it, sometimes the odor migration occurred when it was absolutely still, and that's when you would smell things, not when the wind was blowing it one way or another. So I don't want to obsess too much about debating wind direction and wind speeds. A major concern I have here is visual, okay? And I've been talking about that since 2018. When we had the ordinance in 2019, when we had our first projects come in front of us, you might remember I spoke out against the concentration of projects on Highway 246, as it becoming a little bit of a cannabis corridor. And I perceive the same issue on 101 in a very important scenic spot, in a spot where there are important investments of different kinds of agriculture just across the highway. Mr. Siemens Restoration Oaks, but also the Folded Hills. I'm very cognizant, because I've been in the middle of it, on the Ag Enterprise Ordinance, the Rec Master Plan, and our encouragement of ag tourism and farm stays and campgrounds and other things. that don't exist right now, but we're trying to encourage them and where they are located in relation to cannabis. So I'm very concerned about seeing this become a cannabis corridor, but especially with the hoop houses, because I will tell you, there are no hoop houses of this nature with cannabis along 101. I'm a good lawyer, a good trial lawyer. I don't ask questions that I don't know the answer to already most of the time, and I know the answer to that one. And this would set a precedent for that in an unfortunate location. So I do not like the hoop houses. There are other things I'm concerned about. So I could not make that finding for 2.1.5, but I'm also aware, and I've stated many times, I don't want to rush into a decision on any of these projects. I think I've made that sort of a hallmark of the consideration of every one of them. So I think probably the fair thing to do here is to continue this matter to another hearing so the applicants have time to respond to my comments, perhaps even modify the project. Getting rid of the hoop houses make a major difference, and that members of the public would have more than one 3-minute conversation to make themselves heard, because I think they've been somewhat surprised by this. So even though I kind of feel like getting it behind us and making a motion to deny the project, instead I'm going to make a motion to continue it to such a date as staff can tell us would fit in with our calendar.
Commissioner Reed?
Yeah, with respect to this item, first, with respect to hoop houses in the North County, well, we have a great many hoop houses adjacent to the freeway and other places. I don't personally find them attractive. We don't have any on our ranch, although our 2,000 acres is surrounded by them. They are a reasonable part of agriculture and increasing the potential for raising certain crops. I wonder if these hoop houses were being used for caneberries or blueberries or whatever, if the objections would be similarly great. With respect to the drainage from hoop houses, Santa Maria Valley, we have thousands of acres of hoop houses, but yet during the rainy season we have not yet been washed into the sea. Some interesting comment in the letter from WeWatch pointing out the end view of hoop houses when coming from the south. I think if you look at hoop houses, the most attractive view is looking at them from the end, but perhaps that's personal. With respect to the odor, I can appreciate that. I think odor complaints are very, very subjective. You will have some people complaining about any degree of odor in the absence often of any really scientifically vetted method of evaluating that being applied. Indeed, in the north we have many complaints of odors, particularly with cold crops, things like broccoli and cauliflower. Even people objecting to what I think is the great smell of cilantro being harvested. So odor, again, is largely subjective. As for the comments of a wind advisory, 15 to 30 mile-an-hour winds moving from the field, I would also suggest that in such a case, are these winds actually more likely to transport odors or to disperse odors? Again, kind of a largely subjective situation. With respect to the screening, I can appreciate the fact that when you're a downgrade, looking down, virtually impossible, but from freeway level or street level, these are 10-foot high hoop houses. I know with Commissioners Park's comments relative to the size of the screening plants, and I commend you. I like your plant list. Actually, a number of them I have always incorporated into my landscapes at my last few houses, particularly Toyon and Coffeeberry. If you look at the mature view, I could join Commissioner Park in questioning the ultimate height. If I look at the 5-year range, I think that's quite commonly available. And I'll add that I started out in botany and wound up with a couple of degrees in plant pathology, so I do have some familiarity with the morphology, anatomy, and character of the native plant species. So I think many of the objections can be overcome. But now, with regard to the odor element, when the county has created a very rigorous and demanding ordinance that requires applicants to exert a great deal of time, effort, and expense to meet the various requirements, when we are faced with a project that seems to rise to that level, I think we have an obligation to move ahead and approve. Although in this situation, since it's in Commissioner Park's district, he recommends perhaps giving applicant and neighbors time to address and perhaps work out some of these issues. While I would never at this point support a motion to reject, I could be agreeable to supporting a motion to extend and revisit this at a later time. So that's pretty much my position.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you're doing a great job without warning. I think we've found there are numerous cases where the information coming in to us to make a decision feels a little bit less than we would like, and since the ordinance now gives us broad discretion in terms of considering the impact on the neighbors, we really owe the applicant an opportunity to bolster their case if they wish, based on what they've heard today, to do so. On the other hand, the applicants are represented by very competent, experienced counsel, and the strategic decision may be to accept a denial, and if that's the vote, and go to the Board of Supervisors with an appeal. So I don't want to take that option away, and you don't have to exercise it here today, but in the event the vote is to continue the matter, you would still have the option to accept a denial and go on. But you'd probably have to indicate in some way to the Planning Development Department that you want to do that. So I'm not prepared to vote based on what I've heard today. I wasn't expecting this kind of opposition, but I have worked with Commissioner Park for years on this commission, and I don't think either one of us has ever objected to a motion by the other for continuance. So I'd be prepared to support that.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney, and I would concur with that. So there were some doubts raised about this case as a result of the public hearing and our debate, and so I would defer to Commissioner Park. It's his district, and he raised some very good questions, and I think it's probably a matter of some conversation with the applicant and staff to double check. I just want to be clear that if we continue it, and I'd be happy to second the motion, although it's not really my role, we want to be clear to staff about what it is we're continuing for and what information we want to come back with. And so I'd kind of turn it back to Commissioner Park to outline that in a hit list.
You know, I'm not asking questions of staff. I've already asked them questions, and basically staff said this is information we got from the applicants, and that's where it is. They're not going to go out and independently verify these things. I have taken the number of questions I asked and narrowed them down to a number of things that relate to the finding 2.1.5, and I could go on about grading and so forth. I made the example that if you take an eastern transect from where these hoop houses would be to the freeway on the north-hand side, you're up 12 feet from the height. And those are things that we should be considering when we talk about view. But those are kind of details. I want to give both sides, okay, the public and the constituents who are concerned about it and the applicants, more time, okay, to talk to me, to talk to each other, and develop what we're doing here. Because I can't honestly remember if we've had another outdoor grow come up since we amended the ordinance to allow CUPs. And I think this commission should take more time to take that discretion we're granted and apply it carefully, whether it's to say, no, we don't need anything, or no, we do need something. But it's a power that we complained that we didn't have for 5 years, and now we have it. And so I think we're better serving the public and the applicant to continue it. But no, I'm not going to come up with more directions to staff of questions that I want them to answer.
Okay. So do you want to make a motion on the continuance then?
I thought I did, but I will. I would like to have some input from staff on available dates and whatnot.
Oh, we're hearing from staff July 10th.
That's all right with me. Just don't stack any more on June 26th, but July 10 ought to work.
Okay.
But we ought to find out if it works for the applicant and for Mr. Siemens and others.
It's fine. Okay. All right. So, well, I'll second that motion. So we have a request to continue the item to July 10th for further discussion amongst applicants and the public. And I think we need a roll call on that.
But can we ask the applicant if they're available?
They already checked. Staff checked with
Commissioner Park, I worked with them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know that.
All right. So let's do a roll call.
Okay, so Commissioner Park?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Commissioner Reed?
Not the vote I expected to make, but aye.
And then Madam Briley?
Aye.
So vote carries to continue to the item 4-0.
To July 10th, right?
To the July 10th hearing.
All right. Okay, thank you. And I think with that, our business is done today. All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned.